You want us to what now? Ambassador Chen's eyebrows shot up so high they threatened to escape her forehead entirely. She leaned forward across the ornate crystalline table, her reflection fractaling infinitely through its faceted surface. The Arxosian diplomat, all 12 feet of iridescent chitin and elegant mandibles, clicked in what passed for exasperation among his species. We merely request that humanity remain neutral in this conflict, as befits your status as a developing civilization. Chen bit back a laugh. She'd spent 3 years learning to read Arxosian body language, and right now, Supreme Diplomat Tech's click was practically radiating smugness. The giant insectoid thought he had this in the bag. I see. She took a deliberate sip of water, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. And this wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that the Vexari just asked for our help yesterday, would it? The subtle ripple of purple that passed through Tech's click's carapace told her everything she needed to know. The Arxosians had obviously expected their request to come first. The fact that their ancient rivals had beaten them to the punch clearly rankled. The internal affairs of the greater Arxosian collective are none of your concern. Tech's click responded stiffly. We simply wish to protect your species from involvement in matters beyond your comprehension. This time Chen didn't bother hiding her smile. You know what I find interesting? In the past week, both you and the Vexari have gone from treating us like primitive savages to suddenly caring very deeply about our neutrality. I have to wonder why. The Arxosian's antennae twitched. A tell she'd learned meant discomfort. Your species has shown unexpected advancement in certain areas. We merely wish to keep us from sharing our unexpected advancements with your enemies? Chen interrupted, enjoying how Texclick's mandibles clacked in surprise. Let's be honest here. This isn't about protecting humanity. This is about the fact that you finally got around to properly analyzing the technology we've been accidentally letting slip for the past 5 years. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the environmental systems. Chen could practically see the gears turning in the alien diplomat's head as he reassessed everything he thought he knew about humanity. Impossible, he finally chittered. Your species only achieved faster than light travel 15 years ago. You cannot have what? Chen's smile grew wider. Cannot have been sandbagging this entire time? Cannot have deliberately played up our primitive status while we studied both your civilizations? Cannot have been quietly developing technologies that neither of your species has even conceived of? The purple ripple in Texclick's carapace had evolved into a full-on ultraviolet light show of distress. But the energy readings from your colonies, your ships, are exactly what we wanted you to see. Chen leaned back, thoroughly enjoying herself now. Did you really think we didn't notice both your species planting surveillance devices throughout our territory? We've been feeding you exactly the data we wanted you to have. The Arxosian diplomat's massive form seemed to deflate slightly. To what end? To this end, actually. Chen's expression turned serious, to the point where both sides in your little conflict would realize they might need us. Because now we can have a real conversation about the future of this sector of space. Texclick's antennae went rigid, a sign of intense focus. You orchestrated this entire situation? Orchestrated is such a strong word, Chen demurred. Let's say we recognized an opportunity. Your war with the Vexari has been going on for what? 3 centuries now? Constantly escalating, destroying entire solar systems, displacing billions of refugees that neither side wants to deal with? The Vexari are unreasonable, Texclick began, but Chen held up a hand. Save the propaganda for the public broadcasts. We've studied both sides' claims extensively. You're both equally responsible for this mess, and you both know it. But you're both too proud to back down, too invested in the conflict to see a way out that doesn't involve total victory. She paused. That's where we come in. The Arxosian's compound eyes fixed on her with unnerving intensity. Explain. Humanity is joining the war, Chen declared, causing Texclick to rear back in alarm. But not on either side. We're joining as a third party, with a single objective. Ending it. You cannot be serious. Your species would be annihilated. Chen's laugh echoed through the chamber. Would we? You've been watching our visible military assets, yes. Did you ever wonder about the invisible ones? She pulled out a small holographic projector and activated it. The air above the crystal table filled with technical specifications and sensor readings that made the Arxosian diplomat's antennae quiver in disbelief. This is impossible, he whispered. Hardly. While you and the Vexari were busy throwing planet crackers at each other, Humanity took a different approach to military technology. We focused on stealth, precision, and most importantly, she grinned, efficiency. The hologram shifted to show a massive facility hidden within an asteroid field. This is just one of our production centers. We can manufacture ships at a rate that would make both your species' industrial capacity look primitive. We've just been selective about how we use that capability. But why reveal this now? Because we're tired of watching two of our closest neighbors slowly destroy each other. Because the refugee crisis is starting to affect human space. And because, frankly, we think 3 centuries is long enough for any war. Chen's voice hardened. So here's humanity's official position. We're giving both sides 1 standard galactic month to agree to peace talks. After that, we start enforcing a peace. Enforcing? Texclick's mandibles clicked rapidly. You would dare threaten the greater Arxosian collective? Threaten? No. We're simply informing you of what's going to happen. Chen's smile had an edge now. Did you know we've mapped every single one of your supply lines? Every hidden base? Every secret shipyard? We've had years to do our homework, after all. She let that sink in before continuing. In 1 month, if we don't have agreement from both sides to begin peace talks, humanity will begin systematic interdiction of all military supplies to both sides. No shots fired, no ships destroyed. We'll simply ensure that your war machines run out of fuel, ammunition, and spare parts. Impossible, Texclick repeated, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Would you like a demonstration? Chen asked sweetly. She tapped her holographic projector again, and suddenly every light in the diplomatic chamber went dark. Emergency systems tried to activate but remained stubbornly silent. Even Texclick's personal communications device had gone dead. After exactly 10 seconds, everything came back online as if nothing had happened. That was 1 prototype device affecting 1 room, Chen said into the stunned silence. Imagine what a fleet of ships equipped with similar technology could do to your military operations. The Arxosian diplomat's carapace had turned an interesting shade of pale green, fear, if Chen was reading it correctly. You cannot. We can, we will, and frankly, we should have done it sooner. Chen stood up, smoothing her diplomatic uniform. You have 1 month to convince your government to come to the table. The Vexari ambassador is receiving the same message right now in another chamber. I suggest you both take it seriously. She headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Texclick, the next time your species decides to dismiss a developing civilization as primitive, remember this conversation. The door slid shut behind her with a satisfying hiss, leaving the Arxosian diplomat alone with his thoughts, and a rapidly evolving understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. Outside in the corridor, Chen allowed herself a small fist pump of victory before composing herself back into proper diplomatic posture. Her communicator chirped softly. How'd it go? Her assistant's voice asked. About as expected. The Arxosians thought they were being clever, trying to box us in. How did Diplomat Jackson's meeting with the Vexari go? Similar reaction. Though apparently, their ambassador actually molted from stress when she showed them the tech specs. It's apparently quite rare for their species to do that involuntarily. Chen chuckled. Well, that should get their attention. Have we heard from the refugee relief fleet? They're ready to move as soon as we get either a yes on peace talks or the go-ahead for interdiction operations. The medical ships are fully stocked, and the construction crews are standing by to begin rebuilding efforts. Perfect, Chen smiled, thinking of the massive humanitarian operation humanity had been quietly preparing. For all their advanced technology, neither the Arxosians nor the Vexari had ever quite figured out how to efficiently handle large-scale civilian aid and reconstruction. Humanity, with its long and unfortunate history of cleaning up after wars, had gotten very good at it. Oh, and Chen? Her assistant added. The betting pool back on Earth is heavily favoring them agreeing to talks within 2 weeks. The analysts think neither side can risk calling our bluff. Good thing it isn't a bluff then, isn't it? Chen grinned. Though I expect we'll only need to demonstrate our capabilities once or twice before they get the message. Have the stealth fleets maintain position but update their interdiction targets. I want them ready to move the second that deadline hits. Already done. By the way, the xenopsychologists are saying we should expect at least 3 assassination attempts within the next week. Both species tend to react poorly to loss of face. Chen shrugged. Let them try. It'll just reinforce the point that they don't know nearly as much about our capabilities as they think they do. She paused at a viewport, looking out at the spectacular nebula that served as a backdrop to the diplomatic station. You know what the funny thing is? We're probably doing more damage to their pride just by solving their refugee crisis than by threatening their military operations. How so? Because we're showing them that all their advanced technology, all their military might, all their centuries of evolution and development, and they still never figured out something as basic as how to take care of civilians displaced by war. Sometimes the most advanced solution is just giving people food, medicine, and a safe place to sleep. Her communicator chimed with an incoming priority message. Speaking of which, looks like the first wave of refugee ships just entered human space. Time to show the galaxy what humanity does best. You mean ending wars through superior technology and the threat of overwhelming force? Her assistant asked dryly. No, Chen replied, starting down the corridor with renewed purpose. I mean cleaning up other people's messes and helping people rebuild. The fact that we had to be sneaky and technologically superior to get the chance to do it is just... What do the history books call it? Ah yes, gunboat diplomacy. She smiled as she headed toward her next meeting. Humanity had learned a lot from its own bloody history, including how to prevent others from repeating it, whether they liked it or not. The war would end. The refugees would be cared for. And maybe, just maybe, two ancient civilizations would learn something from the species they'd dismissed as primitive. After all, as Chen liked to remind her staff, humanity's greatest weapon had never been its technology. It had always been its stubborn insistence on finding better ways to solve problems, even if that meant tricking two advanced civilizations into letting humanity solve their problems for them. Now she just had to figure out how to explain to Earth's diplomatic corps why she'd revealed humanity's hidden capabilities ahead of schedule. But given that she'd just prevented several more centuries of interstellar war, she figured they'd probably forgive her. Probably. You did what? Director of Diplomatic Operations Marcus Reynolds stared at Chen through the quantum-entangled holographic display, his usually composed features twisted in disbelief. I accelerated the timeline, Chen replied calmly, reviewing reports on her neural interface while maintaining eye contact with her superior. And before you ask, yes, I had contingencies in place. That's not the point. Reynolds ran a hand through his graying hair. We had a carefully orchestrated plan. Years of preparation, dozens of diplomatic scenarios mapped out, and you just went off script? With all due respect, sir, the situation on the ground changed. Chen's neural interface projected the latest refugee statistics into her field of vision. We've got 18 million displaced civilians in temporary camps along the border of human space. The Arxosians just deployed a new wave of autonomous hunter-killer drones that don't distinguish between military and civilian targets. And the Vexary's response was to start weaponizing local stars. Reynolds' expression softened slightly. I understand the humanitarian concerns, but nothing, sir. We've been playing the long game for 5 years, and in that time the death toll has risen by another billion. A billion. With a B. Chen's voice remained professional, but her eyes blazed. Every projection showed both sides escalating further. We couldn't wait another 8 months for the optimal diplomatic moment. The holographic display split, showing multiple feeds from refugee processing centers. Human medical ships hovered over devastated colonies, their distinctive red and white hulls a stark contrast to the scarred landscapes below. Teams of human aid workers moved through crowds of displaced aliens, distributing supplies and providing emergency care. Look at this, Chen gestured to the feeds. We've been ready to help for months. Our humanitarian fleets have been sitting idle while we waited for the perfect moment to reveal our capabilities. How many more needed to die while we played political games? Reynolds was quiet for a long moment, studying the footage. The Security Council won't be happy. The Security Council can bill me for the classified information I revealed, Chen replied dryly, though they might want to wait until after they see the latest intelligence from the border regions. She sent a data packet through the quantum link. Reynolds' eyes widened as he reviewed it. They're already pulling back their frontline forces? Both sides, Chen confirmed. The Arxosians initiated a strategic withdrawal 6 hours ago. The Vexari followed suit within 30 minutes. Neither wants to risk having their supposedly superior forces embarrassed by human interdiction technology. And the peace talks? The Vexari have officially agreed to participate. The Arxosians are still deliberating, but our analysis suggests they'll confirm within the next 12 hours. Their economic ministry is already quietly reaching out about possible reconstruction contracts. Reynolds shook his head, a reluctant smile forming. You realize you've completely disrupted 3 different diplomatic corps' 5-year plans? Yes, sir. I expect several strongly worded messages about protocol and chain of command are already being drafted. Chen's expression remained serious. But with all due respect, I'd rather face a disciplinary hearing than watch another billion civilians die while we waited for the bureaucratically optimal moment to act. The display shifted again, showing a massive human aid station. Arxosian and Vexari refugees stood side by side, receiving medical care from human doctors and supplies from human aid workers. Despite centuries of propaganda painting each other as mortal enemies, the displaced civilians seemed to have found common ground in their shared suffering and in humanity's unexpected assistance. "There's something else you should see," Chen added, transmitting another data packet. "Our cultural integration teams made an interesting discovery in the refugee camps." Reynolds reviewed the new information, his eyebrows rising. "They're trading recipes? And stories. And art. Apparently, when you take away the government's propaganda and just let people be people." Chen gestured to footage of Arxosian and Vexari children playing together while their parents watched nearby. "Turns out 3 centuries of hatred can start to fade pretty quickly when someone shows up to remind everyone of their common humanity. Or, well, their common sentience in this case." "The xenosociologists are going to have a field day with this," Reynolds mused. "They already are. 3 different universities have requested permission to send research teams." Chen smiled slightly. "Apparently, we've accidentally created the largest experiment in post-conflict reconciliation the galaxy has ever seen." Reynolds was quiet for a long moment, studying the various feeds. Finally, he sighed. "I'll handle the Security Council. You focus on maintaining the momentum you've created. But Chen?" "Yes, sir?" "Next time you decide to dramatically alter years of careful diplomatic planning, maybe give us a little warning?" "Of course, sir. Though you should know." Chen's neural interface highlighted an incoming priority alert. "The Arxosians just officially agreed to the peace talks. They're requesting to begin preliminary discussions within the week." Reynolds actually laughed. "Of course they are. Fine. I'll update your operational parameters. You have authorization to continue acting at your discretion, within reason." "Understood, sir. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You still have to figure out how to get 2 species that have been trying to annihilate each other for 3 centuries to sit down and actually negotiate in good faith." Chen's smile turned predatory. "Oh, I wouldn't worry about that, sir. They're about to discover that humanity's humanitarian aid comes with some very interesting fine print." "Do I want to know?" "Let's just say that access to human medical technology, reconstruction assistance, and refugee support is contingent on maintaining good faith participation in the peace process. And since we're the only ones with the infrastructure and expertise to handle 18 million refugees, you're going to diplomatically blackmail them into behaving?" "Blackmail is such an ugly word, sir. I prefer to think of it as providing strong incentives for peaceful cooperation." Chen's neural interface flagged another incoming alert. "If you'll excuse me, I need to go prepare for an emergency meeting with both species. Economic ministers. Apparently, they've just realized that human reconstruction contracts will only be available to companies that employ both Arxosian and Vexari workers." Reynolds shook his head. "Sometimes I forget that under that diplomatic exterior, you're actually quite devious." "I prefer to think of it as being efficiently humanitarian, sir. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have 18 million refugees to use as leverage for peace." The quantum link closed, leaving Chen alone in her office. She took a moment to review the latest feeds from the refugee centers, watching as former enemies slowly learned to see each other as people rather than targets. Sometimes, she reflected, the most effective way to end a war wasn't through superior firepower or advanced technology. Sometimes all you needed was to remind everyone involved that they weren't so different after all, and then make it absolutely clear that working together was the only way forward. She pulled up the draft agreement for the peace talks, adding a few more clauses about joint reconstruction projects and integrated civilian operations. By the time both sides realized they'd been diplomatically maneuvered into cooperation, their people would already be too intertwined to easily separate. Peace through bureaucratic integration. Not exactly the most dramatic solution, but Chen had learned long ago that the most effective diplomatic weapons were often the most mundane. Besides, she thought with a smile, watching another group of refugee children playing together, sometimes the best way to ensure lasting peace was to make sure the next generation grew up wondering why there was ever a war in the first place. Now she just had to figure out how to explain to the Security Council why she'd turned a carefully planned diplomatic revelation into a massive humanitarian operation. But given the early results, she pulled up the latest casualty projections, now showing a 98% predicted reduction in civilian deaths over the next standard year, and began drafting her report. Sometimes the best defense against bureaucratic oversight was overwhelming humanitarian success. The peace talks were being held aboard Harmony Station, a massive human-constructed diplomatic facility that had mysteriously appeared in neutral space overnight. The fact that neither the Arxosians nor the Vexari had detected its construction was, Chen mused, doing wonders for maintaining their newfound respect for human capabilities. You want us to what? The Arxosian Supreme Commander's carapace flickered with bands of deep ultraviolet, a sign of extreme agitation that Chen's neural implant helpfully translated. As I said, Chen replied calmly, we're proposing a joint peacekeeping force. Mixed crews, shared command structure, unified mission parameters. She gestured to the holographic display showing the proposed organization chart. Humanity will provide the ships and technical oversight, but operational control will be shared equally between all three species. Impossible! The Vexari Fleet Master's crystalline form vibrated with harmonics that Chen's implant tagged as indicating profound disagreement. Our forces have been enemies for centuries. They cannot simply work together? Chen interrupted, pulling up another holographic display. This one showed footage from the refugee processing centers. Like these civilians are working together, like your medical personnel are working together in our aid stations, like your engineers are already working together on reconstruction projects. Both alien military leaders fell silent, studying the footage. Chen pressed her advantage. In the 3 weeks since humanitarian operations began, we've documented over 10,000 successful cooperative interactions between your species. Your people aren't just coexisting, they're actively collaborating. The only ones still clinging to ancient hatreds are the military and political leadership. She let that sink in before continuing, which frankly is becoming something of a public relations problem for you both. Another display activated, showing social media feeds from both civilizations. Posts and images of successful cooperation flooded the screens, along with increasingly pointed questions about why the leadership was still resistant to peace when their people were already living and working together. This is human manipulation, the Supreme Commander chittered. You've engineered this situation. Of course we did, Chen agreed readily, surprising them both. We engineered a situation where your people could see each other as people rather than enemies. We created circumstances where cooperation was both necessary and beneficial. We provided opportunities for natural interaction and collaboration. She smiled. But we didn't engineer the results. Your people did that all on their own. The Fleet Master's crystalline form shifted through several colors before settling on a deep blue that Chen's implant identified as thoughtful. The proposed peacekeeping force. It would operate only along the former conflict zones? Initially, yes. Primarily focusing on humanitarian escort duties, debris clearing, and security for reconstruction operations. Chen brought up the mission parameters. All ships would be equipped with human oversight systems to prevent any misunderstandings. You mean to prevent us from turning the weapons against each other, the Supreme Commander translated bluntly. That too, Chen acknowledged. Though I expect such precautions will prove unnecessary once your crews start working together. We've found that it's much harder to maintain hatred for someone when you're sharing a mess hall with them. Both military leaders began examining the technical specifications with greater interest. Chen hid a smile. She'd known the technology would draw them in. Humanity's ships were generations ahead of anything either species possessed, and the chance to learn about them up close would be irresistible to their military minds. What they hadn't yet realized was that the technical specifications were only half the story. The real weapon in this piece wasn't the advanced ships or the oversight systems. It was the carefully designed social spaces, the shared recreational facilities, the communal dining areas. Everything about the ships was subtly engineered to encourage interaction and cooperation. There is merit to this proposal, the Fleet Master finally admitted. But our governments have already provisionally approved it, Chen interrupted smoothly. Pending your technical review, of course. Both alien leaders stared at her. When? The Supreme Commander demanded. About 6 hours ago, when the latest economic projections showed that continued military spending was becoming politically untenable. Chen brought up yet another display, this one showing economic data. It turns out that when your civilians are actively working together on reconstruction projects, they become rather resistant to proposals that might disrupt their new business partnerships. The Fleet Master's crystalline form chimed in what Chen's implant suggested was resignation. You've trapped us quite thoroughly, haven't you? I prefer to think of it as providing an elegant path to inevitable cooperation. Chen stood, smoothing her uniform. The first joint training exercises begin in 2 standard weeks. I suggest you both begin selecting your initial crew candidates. We found that younger officers tend to adapt better to integrated command structures. As she headed for the door, she paused. Oh, and you might be interested to know that we've already received over 10,000 volunteer applications from your combined forces. Apparently, word of the opportunity has gotten out. She smiled. It seems your people are rather more ready for peace than you thought. The door slid shut behind her, leaving the two military leaders to contemplate how thoroughly humanity had outmaneuvered them, not through force of arms, but through the careful application of social engineering and economic incentives. Outside, Chen's neural implant pinged with an incoming message from Reynolds. How did it go? About as expected, she replied subvocally. They'll agree to the peacekeeping force. Their pride demands they maintain some military presence, and this lets them do it while saving face. And the social engineering aspects? They suspect, but they haven't figured out just how comprehensive it is yet. Chen smiled. By the time they do, we'll have the first generation of integrated crews setting an example for everyone else. The xenopsychologists are already calling it the most ambitious peace-building experiment in galactic history. Good. That means they're focusing on the psychological aspects and not looking too closely at the quantum entanglement networks we're embedding in all the joint facilities. Reynolds was quiet for a moment. Sometimes you scare me, Chen, says the man who approved putting subliminal cooperation-enhancing patterns in all the joint facility architecture. Fair point. The Security Council has officially commended your innovative approach to peace-building, by the way. I think they're still trying to figure out if they're more impressed or terrified by how efficiently you've manipulated two major civilizations into cooperation. Chen entered her office, bringing up the latest reports from the refugee centers. Another 300 mixed-species businesses had been registered in the past day alone. 24 marriage applications had been filed between members of the formerly hostile species. A mixed-species cultural festival was being planned for the next standard month. You know what the funny thing is? She mused. We didn't have to force any of this. All we had to do was create the circumstances where people could see each other as people. Everything else, she gestured to the reports of growing cooperation, they did themselves. Almost like 3 centuries of war was more about leadership pride than actual hatred between the species. Almost exactly like that. Chen smiled. Now we just have to keep their leadership too busy with joint projects to start any new conflicts. Hence the peacekeeping force? Hence the peacekeeping force. Nothing keeps military leaders occupied quite like having to figure out how to make joint operations work. She paused. Also, we may have accidentally started a competition between Arxosian and Vexari engineers to see who can better understand human technology. Accidentally? Would I deliberately create a situation where 2 former enemy species compete to see who can better adopt human safety protocols and cooperative working methods? Yes. Yes, you would. Chen laughed. The best part is, they're both so focused on competing with each other that neither has realized we're only showing them the technology we want them to replicate. The stuff that requires extensive cooperation and joint development to implement. You're turning technological espionage into a peace-building tool? I prefer to think of it as providing constructive outlets for competitive instincts. Chen reviewed another report. Did you know we've had to expand the Joint Engineering Academy 3 times already? Turns out both species are remarkably motivated to work together when they think they might learn human secrets in the process. Reynolds sighed. I suppose I should just be grateful you're using your powers of manipulation for peace. Always, Chen agreed cheerfully. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go leak some particularly interesting technical specifications that can only be properly understood through joint research projects. As the quantum link closed, Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Peace was breaking out all across former war zones, and all it had taken was a little careful engineering, of circumstances, of opportunities, and of human technology just advanced enough to make cooperation irresistible. Sometimes the best way to end a war wasn't through force or threats, but through making peace more interesting than conflict. And if that meant carefully manipulating 2 species into competing to see who could cooperate better, well, that was just efficient diplomacy. Integration report, day 75. Chen dictated to her neural interface. The joint peacekeeping force has exceeded all initial projections for cross-species cooperation. She paused the recording, reviewing the holographic displays surrounding her desk. Each showed different aspects of what was rapidly becoming the most successful peace-building operation in galactic history. The quantum link chimed, and Reynolds' hologram materialized in her office. Have you seen the latest numbers from the joint training exercises? I was just reviewing them, Chen confirmed, gesturing to one of the displays. 87% successful integration rate among mixed crews. Even our most optimistic projections only predicted 60% at this stage, Reynolds noted. According to their models, centuries of ingrained hostility should have been more resistant to change. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps they should spend less time analyzing psychological models, and more time observing what happens when you put two competitive species in a situation where cooperation is the only way to access advanced technology. The display shifted to show footage from one of the joint training vessels. Arxosian and Vexari crew members worked side by side at control stations, their movements surprisingly synchronized after just weeks of training. Have they figured it out yet? Reynolds asked. That the advanced interfaces require synchronized inputs from multiple species to function properly? Not yet. Chen's smile widened slightly. They're too busy competing to see which mixed crew can achieve the highest efficiency ratings. And the fact that the efficiency ratings are directly tied to how well they cooperate is clearly stated in the technical documentation that neither side has bothered to read because they're too focused on trying to reverse engineer the technology. Reynolds shook his head. Sometimes I forget how devious you can be. I prefer efficiently diplomatic, Chen corrected. She brought up another display showing economic data. Have you seen the latest market projections? The ones showing that companies employing mixed species workforces are outperforming single-species operations by an average of 40%? Those would be the ones. Chen highlighted several key indicators. Though I'm more interested in the fact that both species' military-industrial complexes are rapidly restructuring toward joint civilian production. Because they think it will give them better access to human technology? Because we made sure the most profitable reconstruction contracts require mixed-species teams using human-designed collaborative manufacturing processes. Chen gestured, and the display shifted to show a massive shipyard. Though I have to admit, watching former weapons manufacturers competing to see who can build better civilian infrastructure is particularly satisfying. The quantum link chimed again, and a priority alert flashed across Chen's neural interface. She raised an eyebrow as she reviewed it. Well, this is interesting. What is it? We just received a joint petition from Arxosian and Vexari cultural organizations. They're requesting permission to establish a combined historical commission. Chen forwarded the document to Reynolds. Apparently, they want to begin reconciling their historical narratives and documenting the peace process for future generations. Reynolds reviewed the petition. This is unexpected. The xenosociologists predicted it would take at least a decade before either species was ready to address historical reconciliation. I may have had something to do with that, Chen admitted. Remember those technical specifications I leaked last month? The ones that could only be understood through joint research? They weren't entirely technical in nature. Some of the documents contained historical data about Earth's own history of conflict resolution and reconciliation. I thought it might provide some useful context. Reynolds stared at her. You weaponized human history lessons? I prefer to think of it as providing inspiring examples of how former enemies can work together. Chen brought up another display showing attendance records from the Joint Engineering Academy. Though I will admit, embedding the historical data in technical documentation ensured they actually read it. And now they want to apply those lessons to their own situation? It would appear so. Chen reviewed another incoming alert. Oh, and it seems the joint peacekeeping crews have started organizing their own cultural exchange programs. Apparently sharing mess halls has evolved into sharing traditions. The display showed footage from one of the peacekeeping vessels, where an Arxosian ritual of respect was being performed with both species participating. The movements had been modified to accommodate Vexari physiology, creating something entirely new in the process. They're developing their own hybrid culture, Reynolds observed. As intended. Chen's expression softened slightly. Though I have to admit, they're adapting faster than even I expected. Did you know there's a movement among the younger generations to create a new combined language? They're calling it peace speak. Please tell me you didn't engineer that too. Not directly. Though the communication interfaces on the peacekeeping vessels may have been designed to subtly encourage the development of shared terminology. And the translation matrices might have been programmed to favor terms that emphasized common concepts between the species. Reynolds sighed. Is there anything about this peace process you haven't carefully engineered? The genuine friendships developing between former enemies. Chen replied promptly. The increasing number of mixed-species families. The spontaneous cultural festivals breaking out across former conflict zones. She gestured to various displays showing scenes of cooperation and celebration. We created the circumstances for peace, but they're the ones choosing to embrace it. Another alert flashed across her neural interface, and Chen actually laughed out loud. What is it? Remember how we embedded those quantum entanglement networks in all the joint facilities? The ones we claimed were for security monitoring? Yes. Well, it seems both species' scientific communities have finally figured out that they're actually the backbone of an advanced communication system. They've just submitted a joint proposal to expand the network to cover all former conflict zones. Let me guess. You planned this? The proposal is word for word identical to the one we prepared 3 months ago. Chen's smile was distinctly satisfied. They think they're cleverly taking advantage of human infrastructure. In reality, they're voluntarily building the communication networks needed for lasting peace, Reynolds finished. Because of course they are, because you planned it that way. Peace through bureaucracy, technology, and carefully managed competition, Chen confirmed. Though I have to admit, watching them compete to see who can be more peaceful is particularly entertaining. She reviewed another incoming report and her expression turned thoughtful. You know what the real victory is? The refugee camps are starting to empty. Not because people are returning to segregated communities, but because they're choosing to build new mixed settlements instead. The display showed construction projects where Arxosian and Vexari workers built homes side by side, their children playing together in the background. They're choosing integration on their own, Reynolds observed, because we made it the most practical option. Chen's voice was soft but satisfied. All we had to do was create circumstances where cooperation was more advantageous than conflict. Their natural adaptability and competitiveness did the rest. She began composing a response to the Historical Commission's petition, already thinking about how to use the reconciliation process to further strengthen the peace. You know, Reynolds said thoughtfully, other species are starting to take notice of how effectively humanity managed this situation. We've received inquiries from 3 other conflict zones about possible human mediation. Chen's smile widened slightly. How fortunate that we already have thoroughly tested protocols for promoting peace through strategic technological sharing and social engineering. You're going to end up revolutionizing galactic diplomacy at this rate. That was rather the point, Chen agreed. Though I prefer to think of it as helping the galaxy realize that sometimes the most advanced solution is simply getting people to talk to each other, even if you have to trick them into it with shiny technology first. She turned back to her reports, already planning the next phase of peace-building operations. After all, now that they had proof that their methods worked, there was an entire galaxy of conflicts waiting to be resolved through carefully managed cooperation. Humanity might have joined the war to end it, but they were going to win the peace by making it impossible for anyone to want to fight anymore. One carefully engineered social interaction at a time. To be continued.